Hi guys, I am your Anand and you watching Anand channel. If you like the video, please like and subscribe and don't forget to tap on the bell icon to get the notification.
Right now, thrift and reuse centres all over the country are reporting that they're overwhelmed with donations as people, apparently enamored with Marie Kondo's decluttering Netflix show, are clearing all the junk out of their homes and apartments. But if you ask me, Volvo was a little bit ahead of the tidying up craze, because when its designers and engineers worked on the new S60, well, they only kept in the things that would spark joy in drivers, and they left out all the unnecessary stuff that you don't need in a luxury sedan. And that's what makes this such a great car. The new S60 is actually a smidge larger on the outside than its direct rivals like the A4, C-Class and 3 Series, but its design language makes it look incredibly light on its feet. The panels are clean and simple, the lines are incredibly taut, the lights are striking. The Volvo looks great in every situation, but perhaps most important, it looks very different from its competition. It's a long way from the boxy, dowdy Volvo 850 you remember from your youth. The generous dimensions on the outside mean there's a lot of space on the inside. In the back seat, for instance, I've got plenty of headroom to stretch out and a pretty good amount of legroom too. Trunk space is good for the class as well, although if you do need to carry more stuff, I have to point out that Volvo also sells a station wagon version of this car called the V60. It looks like the Marie Kondo treatment was applied to the car's interior as well, because when you look around the cabin you notice there are almost no buttons and that overall it's a very simple design. But that doesn't mean it's plain. There are lovely materials throughout that both look great and feel really good to the touch. Because there aren't many buttons, you control almost everything through this 9-inch touchscreen infotainment system. Now overall I like it. I think its operation is pretty straightforward, but there are times when it's slow to respond. If you want a closer look at some of these features, we've got a separate S60 Tech Check video that dives into all these features in depth. So what about driving the Volvo S60? Well, it's just really good. It's sort of like sitting down for lunch with an old friend, where the conversation just flows naturally and easily. Volvo has done an amazing job of making this car just really pleasant and easy to drive. I'm driving the T6 version of the S60, which means that its 2-litre 4-cylinder engine has both a turbocharger and a supercharger, boosting output to 316 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. The T6 also comes standard with all-wheel drive, and I've got an 8-speed automatic transmission. Now, when I first drove this T6 engine a couple of years ago in the first XC90 that had it, I thought it was a little bit rough around the edges. But by this point in the new S60, Volvo has really polished the engine, getting rid of any uncouth NVH that I noticed before. What I especially like is that there's so much real-world flexibility to this powertrain. There's gobs of torque all across the rev range, and the transmission is really nicely responsive. There is a worry with compact luxury sedans like this that the engineers are going to really go to great efforts to make the car sporty and kind of ruin it a little bit for everyday driving. Now, fortunately, Volvo hasn't done that. The S60 is in a really nice middle ground. It is responsive and entertaining to drive, but it's also just very well behaved. You get the sense that confidence and quietness and comfort were more important for the engineers than lap times. And frankly, that's actually what you want in a luxury. S60 is perfectly poised to be a strong contender in the crowded luxury sedan segment.
Luxury SUV craze with the M-Class more than 20 years ago. Well, in the ensuing years, we've had a name change, but this 4th generation SUV really does look toward the future of transportation with all kinds of driving aids and plenty of tech. But how much is too much? Come ride right seat with me as we dig into the 2020 Mercedes-Benz GLE 450. First thing you notice when you get behind the wheel of the GLE is this massive massive amount of screenery that we have here. Yes, screenery, it's a word, look it up. I've got two screens, one for my gauge cluster and one that is running the new Mercedes-Benz user experience infotainment system. Now I've got a full review of the MBUX system on a separate review, so be sure to check that out. But for now, I will say that while this system is a little bit more slick than that old command system, I'm not really sure it's any better. If I could give this car an 11 for features, I most definitely would, especially when it comes to features with your seat. I mean, I can select my seating position based on how tall I am. I've got massaging seats, and not just one kind of massage, multiple kinds of massage. And heated seats, oh yeah, that's so passé. Not only will this one give you hot cross buns, it will also heat up the surrounding panels. I mean, I don't even mind if I get stuck in traffic. This car is that comfortable. The design-wise, I really like the way it looks. I mean, I like the nice horizontal lines that I've got going on, but one stupid thing, this fakey McFakerstein little vent right here. I mean, I get that you needed something in that corner to kind of finish the design. I understand it, but just make it a real vent. It's not that hard. Under the hood is a 3-liter inline 6-cylinder turbocharged engine, putting out 362 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. And that is mated to a 9-speed automatic transmission. Now you can get a smaller GLE 350 with a 2-liter engine, but only the larger engine gets the new EQ Boost mild hybrid system. That gives me an on-demand boost of about 21 horsepower when I want it, plus it powers the new E-Active Body Control System, which individually controls the suspension at each corner. So how is that put into this vehicle? Okay, so you put this guy into curve mode, and instead of like leaning outwards from the corners, you actually lean into the corners like a motorcycle. It's not very aggressive. I mean, the transmission and the throttle are both put to really mild settings, but it is really, really smooth. Plus, there's a forward-facing camera that can scan the road, so the suspension knows what's coming up. No, instead, if you want to have a little bit of fun, it is Sport and Sport Plus mode all the way. And what I really like here is that the transmission will downshift on braking into a turn instead of waiting for me to ask for the power when I go out of a turn. So all I need to do is just unwind a little bit, squeeze on that throttle, and that power is there waiting for me. I mean, I didn't even really feel the need to use the paddle shifters. There are plenty of driver's aids in the Mercedes, almost to a fault, to be honest with you. There's adaptive cruise control, which can lock onto the car in front of me, and in traffic, it'll bring me to a complete stop and then have a little pause. But frankly, that's nothing new, right? A lot of manufacturers do that. Where the Mercedes has an ace up its sleeve is that it can read traffic signs. So let's say you've got the cruise control set for 55 and you drop into a 45-mile-an-hour zone, the car will slow dramatically. Plus, it can use GPS to see if there's any upcoming curves and react accordingly. Honestly, it's a little bit too aggressive. I mean, yeah, I can understand if you're like on a dark desert highway somewhere, you got the cruise control set for 70 and there's a 90-degree right-hand turn coming up. Okay, I get it. But in the around town highway toddlings that I was doing, it just slowed the car down too much. There's an active lane keeping assist and an active steering assist that can even change lanes for me. And honestly, all these driver's aids, it's all just a little much. I mean, self-driving cars are coming, I get it. And companies like Mercedes-Benz, Tesla, and to a lesser extent GM with Cadillac Super Cruise, they're really leading the charge. But I think I'd rather wait for a car that just is fully autonomous. I mean, in the GLE, I still have to keep my hands on the wheel, I still have to pay attention, so why need the car to change lanes for me? I'd rather just wait and have everything into one single package that I can then turn on or turn off as I desire. The 2020 Mercedes-Benz GLE goes on sale in the spring of this year, and I don't even have full pricing for you guys. I mean, this model is fully loaded, and while it starts at about $61,000, I'd expect this particular car to go for a whole lot more.
heard that we at Roadshow quite like the BMW M2. We think it's the best driving M car in quite some time. In fact, our praise has been so effusive, you'd be forgiven for wondering if there's any way at all that BMW could improve on the M2. Fortunately, BMW's engineers could imagine a few ways to improve on it. Meet the M2 competition. So what's changed? The M2 competition is more powerful, quicker, faster around a track, and critically, even more fun to drive. Gone is the old car's single-turbo 3-litre inline-six engine. It's been replaced with the twin-turbo 3-litre engine from the M3 and M4. That means an extra 40 horsepower for a total of 405, and an extra 63 pound-feet of torque for a total of 406. 0 to 60 takes just 4 seconds flat, but what that number doesn't tell you is how effortlessly fast this car is at all times. The engine and the 7-speed dual-clutch transmission are so instantly responsive that there's a huge wave of acceleration as soon as you put your foot down. It seems like there's no turbo lag at all, and with so much torque readily available so quickly, this car feels even faster than the numbers suggest. Going along with the extra power, the M2 competition gets upgraded suspension all round, a gorgeous carbon fiber strut brace borrowed from the M3 and M4, and bigger brakes. With all those upgrades, this thing hangs on around bends even more tenaciously than ever before. Now, one thing that you won't find on the M2 competition is adaptive dampers, which is a bit of a surprise because they've kind of become a staple on all modern performance cars. But on the other hand, I kind of appreciate the simplicity. Here's one suspension tune that works all the time, rather than 2 or 3 different ones that are slightly compromised and I have to pick between when I get onto a twisty road. Although it is a little bit disappointing that there's this empty switch button down here where the damper button would be on other 2 Series models. Now, if you want a metric of how much faster this car is with all the extra power and the handling and braking upgrades, BMW says the M2 competition is about 4 seconds quicker per lap around the Nürburgring than the old M2, which is a figure that will be super relevant to most of its buyers and owners. What will be relevant to owners, though, is that this car is just a huge amount of fun to drive all the time. Unlike some track-focused high-performance cars that are only exciting when you're really at maximum attack, the M2 competition just oozes feeling and excitement all the time. You can actually enjoy driving this car at reasonable speeds. You can actually use all the power on the road. And there's more steering feel and feedback than I remember from any BMW in quite some time. This is a car that's always amped up and energized and on. And that's what makes it so much fun. From every angle, the M2 competition looks imposing and serious, what with its flared fenders, big air inlets, those gorgeous 19-inch wheels, and its hunkered down ride height. I also love how it looks inside, from all the exposed matte finish carbon fiber, these snug but not too snug bucket seats, and this sports steering wheel that feels great in my hands. And BMW tops it off with a lot of lovely little details, like the seatbelt has this stitching to look like the M brand's colors. That's cool. By now you're probably thinking, wow, is there anything you don't love about this M2 competition? Well, yes. Like a lot of high-strung performance cars, it's kind of abrasive on the road when you're not driving it really, really hard. The engine drones a lot and there's tons of tire noise. The ride quality is very, very stiff. This car bounces and jiggles over every little imperfection in the road. You know, in hindsight, maybe it would be nice to have adaptive dampers with a comfort setting. All that steering feedback that's so fun on a back road means this car tramlines and bump steers a little bit. It can require a lot of correction when you're driving on the highway. And fuel economy is a lot worse than the old M2. This one's rated at 17 miles per gallon city and 23 mpg highway, compared to 2026 for last year's M2. But you know what? I don't really care about any of those things when I'm behind the wheel. This car is so good and so involving and so fast that I just want to drive it all day long. The BMW M2 competition is fast, capable, and hugely fun to drive. Now, at $65,000 as tested, it's not exactly cheap, but that still is a little bit more affordable than the base prices of the M3 and M4. But above all, what I like about this car is that I think it's the right size, the right amount of power, and the right handling balance to be a riot on the road at all times. Somehow, BMW's engineers took their best sports coupe, and made it even better.